Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of House of League. It's myself, James Smailes, back again with our all-out rugby league editor, Matt Shaw. It's just me and thee. It's just the two of us.
I know.
Again.
How are you?
You got that little space on the sofa.
Josh has decided to go on holiday again.
He's the Judith Chalmers of the rugby league desk.
Unconfirmed reports. He's on. He's taking all this time off to get away from us because we are giving him too much of a hard time.
He's taking the time off now while that HR bullying thing goes through.
That accusation, allegation. And Dan won't come on because LFC lost, so So we were out of options this week.
We joke about it, but Hull FC rearranged their press day, so we're to send Dan over to that. Lots to go at this week. We're going to talk disciplinary. We're going to talk some coaching changes, planned potential coaching changes, I should say, before we go a bit too carried away. And we're going to talk Salford again, and unfortunately more worrying developments of that club. Where do you want to, this week, for a change, where do you want to start?
Should we start on Salford? Because I think, while I think everyone's a bit fed up with the story.
Yes.
I do think what happened last week does.
It was significant last week.
That was
very significant.
I think it was on last week's show. I said, we've been fairly quiet on Salford because in the grand scheme of things, what's played out over the last probably 4 or 5 weeks hasn't really meant that much.
No, it's not affected anything in the long run.
This now has real scope for the worst.
So let's bring people up to speed, and there will be some people out there that are not following it, daily or weekly. And what's happened is a big part of this takeover plan with the prospective owners is, and they've been very clear about this as well, is they want the stadium. They're not so bothered about the rugby league club. They want the stadium, they want the land, they want the facility that gives them for advertising and other initiatives. But to get the stadium, they've got to work with Salford City Council, who have got that ownership of the stadium and the land. Them negotiations have been very difficult for some time. Previous regimes and people in charge have had difficult negotiations with the council who are representing their best interests and the best interests of that wider Salford community. They've now come out and said they're not going to, they've basically ended all negotiations with the prospective owners of this takeover group. And that's it. They're done with them. They kind of said, it was one of these, right, we can't take this any further. We're done. That leaves the takeover really in a precarious position, which leaves the future of Salford Red Devils in a very precarious position. Where do you see us being at this moment?
Limbo. What I find interesting, you've surmised it very well there. What I'm quite surprised about is that this ownership group's still around.
Yeah.
Because it's been made clear publicly that the intention, the focus, the priority is the land and the stadium, and no money will be put into the club until that happens. Well, that's not happening now. And if they aren't got to put any money into Salford, then what's the point of them staying around? Because Salford need money injected into them to survive, There was the tax bill that got reported. Salford did challenge that.
Yes, there was reports that over $500,000 was owed to HMRC and the winding up order had been issued.
Yeah.
Salford challenged that, but we haven't had any further clarity on that.
They haven't come out and denied it. They haven't come out and denied it privately. They've, but they haven't publicly. And we all know how much money they owe elsewhere. We know that there are a lot of the debts are around $3.5 million now. So it's a club on the brink. It really is a club on the brink now.
But for some context, we're saying the debts are at $3.5 million and they owe X and Y and they owe money everywhere. That's not that unusual for a Super League club.
No.
But the difference being they don't have a benefactor that's covering it.
And this has been the problem. Salford have tried to spend the money that other clubs do, but they don't have the benefactor who can cover it.
Yeah.
That's fundamentally the problem. They've lived beyond the means. There's, and which goes way beyond the current ownership group. What we need now is some communication from this ownership group. What next? What is next? We just don't know. I think, again, how many times we've said it on this podcast, the communication out of the club, and this goes through 2 different ownership groups now, has been awful.
Yeah.
And I just think, when there's so much said about you, which there has been about this ownership group, they've stayed very, very quiet. And a lot of people have had a lot of things to say. There's been a lot in the press, a lot from the council, a lot of accusations, a lot of claims. I think when that much is said and you don't come back and say anything, it almost adds to it, doesn't it? Because you're not coming out fighting and giving your version of events. They have to come out and give some communication now, whether it be plans for the club, actually their perspective on what's gone on. Do they think that the council have operated properly? I don't know. These are all the things that they just need to come out and clarify. But more than anything, they need to clarify what the future holds for this rugby league club. Because from the outside looking in, and from the knowledge we have, based on what's been said, you're left to think that the club is on the brink of administration, which then means guaranteed relegation from Super League.
Oh, and we've had it from pretty good sources that conversations, I'm not saying plans are in place by any stretch, but initial conversations, and that might just be people chatting on the phone or at games, but conversations have been had about, well, what does the rest of the season look like if Salford are not involved? Do we operate with an 11-team league? How do we go? Do we expunge all their results? These sort of conversations, and they might be at the very early stage.
But they're not an early stage, though.
But they've started, and that shows that there's a real worry from the owners about, well, what does this do for the integrity of the competition as well?
They started months ago. The owners have been adamant that Salford are going bust since the off season.
Yeah.
So these conversations it becomes trickier the deeper you get into the season. So if more games have been played, if it's 2 or 3, it's not as bad. Well, we're 11 rounds in now. You've obviously got the TV deal and fixture fulfillment. The one thing that I think the vast majority of the Super League owners are hell-bent on and aligned on, they have to get Salford through this season. Whatever that looks like, whether that means giving them players, whatever it may look like, there is a belief that from the majority that they have to get them through this campaign. What I will say is, it's almost impossible to see a scenario where Super League involves Salford Red Devils next year.
Yes.
And then it's, after that, from the outside looking in, while administration, this is just a pure outside observation, administration seems like the best course of action for Salford now. Yes, it means they definitely go down because the IMG grading state that if you have an insolvency like an administration, you lose a grade. They are a B. You would go to a C. A C grade club cannot be in Super League. So that would be guaranteed relegation.
Yes. You'd think they might struggle just on the normal gradings anyway to get in.
Exactly. I just think restart. The debts Paul King, when he was in charge, talked regularly about how the debts, which I think were around 1.2, 1.4 million at the time, were crippling the club alongside the stadium deal, which has always been said was a bad hand dealt to Salford. Fair enough. We're at 3.5 now. It's not. They're not managing it. They haven't managed it. It's got worse. And then you wonder, well, how on earth can they get back to an even without just resetting?
I mean, there's concerns and administration, but staying at the stadium and the future and everything else. And obviously, if you're a Salford fan, very, very worrying times. What I would say to offer some sort of hope is we do see, and I am a firm believer in this, that sometimes a backward step and a sizable one that administration would bring, but sometimes it's necessary to have that reset and you come back stronger. Not anywhere near in the same sort of financial woes or even same situation, but as a little bit of an example, look at where Lee Leopards, but especially look at where Hull Kingston Rovers are now, 2 clubs that relegated out of the Super League. From Hull Kingston Rovers, where I can speak with a bit more authority, financially, the rebuild that was needed, then the investment that slowly came in to certain areas. Then it builds and it builds, and then you improve the stadium, and then you improve the squad, and you get to where they are. Now, I'm not saying Salford going to administration in 5 years, they're winning the grand final. What I'm saying is sometimes while it feels so traumatic to have that major step backwards, the reset is the best thing for everybody. And maybe that is the answer here.
Right, I agree with you, but I don't agree with you. I agree with your point and the whole KR example, the Lee example. The difference here is Salford, the only way that happens if you've got money. Lee had money to do it. Hull KR had money to do it.
Yeah.
The whole reason Salford are in this mess is because they've tried to do something
money
without the money.
Yeah.
And if they go into admin and get a new ownership group, whatever that may look like, if they don't have the money to get them back in Super League, they're not going to do it. For the examples you point out, I can throw at you Halifax, Widnes, Bradford.
Yeah, it doesn't always work.
And what's the common denominator? Money. Salford haven't had the money and tried to do it, and that's why they are where they are now. If they go down and they are run properly, unless they get a benefactor, they won't have the money, and it's almost impossible, particularly in an IMG grading era. But I would argue even in a promotion relegation era, it's almost impossible to do it. I know people clamour for the return of promotion relegation, but if you look at the teams that went up, what did they all have? They had money. What do you need now to get up in IMG? You have to build everything else. What do you need to do that? Money. The common denominator is money, whichever way you do it. What the point you're trying to say there is applicable if you have money. If Salford come back and don't have money, and that applies for any club, the only way I think you realistically do it is by spending beyond your means again, which is what's got Salford in this mess in the first place.
Circle. No, I get that, and I take that point. Let's wrap up on Salford, but just one final thing from me on this then. Do we need, and we've been critical of the RFL and their lack of kind of visibility on this whole situation. Do we need some sort of direction from them? Should they be saying anything at this stage, or should they keep their own counsel, if you will, just for now and see how it plays out? We don't know what extent's going on in the background and whether they're getting involved in any council negotiations or anything. But do we need some sort of visibility from them on this?
I think what we need to know in the immediate, and I'm sure the RFL are doing this behind the scenes, are these players going to get paid at the end of the month?
Yeah.
That's the key thing, because I would be amazed if they don't get paid. I don't think they play. I think they've been at the wit's ends for a while. I don't think they would. That then leads to all sorts of problems. I think in terms of communication now, Smailes, particularly from an RFL, and the damage is done. Whatever they come out and say now, the actions should have been taken months ago. I don't know what they do now that can save it. The RFL,
yeah,
they had their opportunity in November, December, not now. So I think from an RFL perspective, the damage is done. Who we need to hear from right here, right now, are the Salford ownership group to tell us, first and foremost, players are going to get paid. Right, we're not getting the stadium. This is what's happening. Whatever that looks like, good, bad, ugly, horrendous, I think that's the least the fans deserve right now.
Yes, well said. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's move on. One story which took my interest the last few weeks, but peaked it again a little bit last week, was the talk of who's going to be the new head coach at the Perth Bears, the new franchise, if you will, into the NRL in Australia. And we've seen lots of speculation in recent weeks, but one that came last week was the legend that is Mal Meninga, who...
Some player.
Yeah. Well, people were poking fun when we were in, people might not know this, but we went to Las Vegas earlier in the year, and I was down on Fremont Street and filming all the people coming, and when he went past, my camera just kind of froze. Well, it didn't freeze because it tracked him. But I was like following everybody coming past. And then when Mal came, I just kind of just followed him and stayed with him. And I had a few other journos behind me and said, "You're missing the rest of it." And I went, it's Mal Meninga.
What are you going to be like during the Ashes?
It's just, it's big Mal. I mean, I've been in his presence a few times, but still like a little schoolboy. Yeah, he was one of my faves when I was a kid. Anyway, I mean, who doesn't love Mal Meninga? But going off track, he's been linked with that job in a kind of which is what we suspected and we talked before, let's get a big high-profile name in there just to get it up and running, and then maybe bring through his number 2 in a year or two. The number 2 that they're linking with Mal Meninga, Sam Burgess, which took my interest, and I could see that.
Completely see that.
I can really see that. And then just throwing into the mix, we know that Brad Arthur continues to be linked. We still don't know for certain his future at Leeds Rhinos. There was talk in some of the Aussie press last week on Willie Pieters again, which is why I think we asked Willie for his reaction on that when we spoke to him. And Willie admitted, that the NRL in the future at some point holds a bit of a low for him, but he's got no intentions of walking out on Hull Kingston Rovers at the minute. But it really does feel like what's going to happen at Perth could really have a big say in Super League moving forward, not just on the playing front, but the coaches front as well. What's your take on where we're at the minute? And do you think that Leeds need to now start pressing Brad Arthur for an answer on what he's doing?
I think they needed to press a while back. Well, no, I say that. I do and I don't. On the Mal Meninga stuff, it was interesting reading the Aussie press because they said Meninga and Brad Arthur had been interviewed. I got told Sam Burgess got interviewed by a couple of people over here, and I thought the Aussie press would know better than me what's going on there. And I just wondered whether it's because it's for the assistant's role. And
the Aussie press know what you've had for breakfast better than you. But
yeah, so I thought, fair enough. But I've been told by a number of people he got interviewed. So, but for the assistant role, maybe. I think that's a perfect slot for Sam.
Yes. As a way into the NRL.
A way in to learn under one of the best. He's still an incredibly young coach. People forget that. What is he? Mid-30s? Late 30s?
Yeah.
Young coach.
2 years as a head coach.
100%. So I think that's a perfect transition for him. As for Brad Arthur, look, I think he'll be in Australia next year one way or another. The Newcastle job's going to come up. Peter Parr is a big fan of him, who's the rugby director there.
Which I think we've discussed recently.
Other jobs will inevitably come up. So I think Brad Arthur's back in the NRL. As for Leeds, look, I think they've been planning for him to go. The good thing for Leeds, in the way it's worked out, I'm a big advocate. If you're going to get rid of a coach, you need to do it early to get your new coach in to do your recruitment. You don't want to do it and then decide late, which is a discussion we had about Paul Wellens not too long ago at St Helens. The difference with Leeds is their cap space is so tight for next year after all the retentions that they're not going to be able to do much recruitment. Anyway. So that the need to get something sorted immediately isn't as high. The decisions that they've had to make, everyone would have re-signed James McDonnell. Everyone would have re-signed Tom Holroyd. Yes. Everyone would have re-signed Michael Ledsky. I don't think you need a coach to, one way or another, I think every coach is aligned on that.
They're the sort of players that they're every coach's player.
100%. So I don't think it's been that important for Leeds. It's probably becoming important now because of everything else going on. So not so much if Mal Meninga goes, I suppose, but he's still, if he goes there, Sam Burgess moves, Warrington are then looking for a coach.
Yes.
Then Warrington are looking for a coach at the same time as Leeds. If Newcastle get rid of their coach, they're looking for a coach. Leeds probably need to move early so that they've got a little bit of a jump on the other teams in terms of the coaching scene.
To pick from
100%. If they wait till other clubs are in that market, it becomes a bit harder to do it. So I don't think they need to they don't need a definitive answer from a recruitment perspective, player recruitment. They do from a coaching recruitment perspective.
And one of the names that's been linked with the Rhinos, and we've been hearing this name for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we couldn't get it and stood up any further from any other sources to really go after it. So eventually, I think you and was it your question?
Well, it came
to Steve McNamara.
It started coming out on social media a little bit.
Yeah,
the jungle drums started beating across social media, and I thought, how long ago did I first mention this rumor to you?
a long time ago.
But it's one of those. This is the part of journalism that people don't get. That's so annoying. Everyone who mentioned it, and a lot of people have mentioned it, and you go, "Where have you heard it?" And they're like, "Oh, no one I trust. To words to that effect. It's just something I've heard."
Yeah,
I can't run a story off that.
No.
So,
we need you to.
So we've waited and waited, and then I'm like, you know what? And then it just happened. It came out on social media the night that we were there. So I thought, I'm just going to ask him after the game. And he wasn't. I did give him a tip off before the presser that I was going to ask him, and he wasn't best pleased. Understandably, his team just lost 40-0.
Yes,
but I was like, well, I'd rather tell him and give him the heads up than just catch him off guard.
Yeah.
Do
you see it? Can you see it happening? Can you? First off, I mean, this isn't a question of would Steve McNamara leave Catalan to come back to England. I think he would, and that's not disrespectful to Catalan. I think he's done great things there, but while he would still love to win a grand final, he's taken them to a grand final and won a Challenge Cup, and that what he's done at that club, I think, is unquestionable.
Yeah.
I think to move back to England, not that he's got a shabby life there in the south of France, but I think he probably would, with Ben being over here, his son, and obviously his daughter
family,
and full family and everything, and and his mum and dad, and so I think ideally that would be a good fit for him. But is he a good fit for Leeds? Do you see Leeds being after him? In many ways, there's some differences, but in many ways I can see some similarities between Steve McNamara and Brad Arthur in terms of some of the philosophies and the approach to the game.
It's a good question. I'm with you that I could see Steve coming back. I do think any coach at any club has a shelf life.
Yeah.
Steve McNamara's been there 7 years now, I think. You will struggle to find many examples of coaches staying at any club for 7 years. Let's be right. The Dragons were poor last year, and they've not been good this year.
No, disappointing in the Challenge Cup.
I think Steve has earned some time, but when you're spending, they've got the squad they have, the personnel they've got. How much time do you get? I'm not sure. Especially if they were to miss out on the playoffs again, which, let's be right, is realistic where we are right now.
Currently 8th in the table.
Yeah, So you wonder whether they'd be ready for a change. You wonder whether Steve would be ready for a change. Now you go on to Leeds. All I would say on Leeds is I think there is public perception is something that they think about. I do really think that Leeds. And I'm not sure that the fans, rightly or wrongly, and I would say probably wrongly, I don't think they would buy into.
I would say wrongly because you're talking, as I've said, about a Challenge Cup winning coach that's took a team to a grand final, who's the former Great Britain
100%
head coach.
You've got the former national team head coach. You've got a guy who took Catalans to the Challenge Cup.
Yeah,
won the Challenge Cup, won the League Leader Shield, 2 grand finals. He's done a great job there.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason,
NRL experience with great contacts.
But we all know what, and I do think Leeds fans are like, and it's not necessarily a criticism, just an observation. They like a name.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that Steve McNamara is a name as much as his CV is impressive. I think I just don't know. I also think, I don't know.
I know what it is.
But what I will say for Steve, I think Steve's brilliant at building a club as well. He's not just a good coach.
Yeah.
If you look at what he did at national level and he built the infrastructure, he did a brilliant job of that. He's done a brilliant job at Catalans of getting, he's not done it all single-handedly, but he's got the people in place. He's got the junior development. He's made that a priority. He's done all these things. He's very good at that. Now, the Leeds need that. Is it already in place? I would argue.
They do already have the setup. They've got the setup. They're one of the best at that. They have been. Yeah. That's why the Leeds Rhinos. That's why they've had the success that they've had. But the JJB's taking over. They're losing Gary, who's heavily involved in that. Does it help having a coach in place who is invested in that beyond the 17 that's taking the field each
Yeah,
week.
this is it. There's a lot to get through here. Look, I don't think it would be a bad appointment. I'm not sure the fans would agree, and I think that does hold some power at Leeds.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting one. I thought Steve McNamara would have been an excellent appointment for Hull FC 12 months ago.
Let's roll through a few things because we're running out of time and we've been through quite a lot that I just want to touch on really quickly. St Helens, just in a minute, impressing. Sailor went out to the wing. Lomax comes back in the half alongside Whitby. Have they found the answer now?
I'm not going to say they found the answer, but it was a solution.
And
they were
an
good.
Impressive winning one as well.
Right, listen, Catalans were really bad.
Yeah.
But Saints were good. They looked far more comfortable on the ball. They threw it around. They played some good rugby. They did everything that the fans have been moaning that they haven't been doing.
Yeah.
Posted points. Look, I don't think anyone would get carried away. They've still got to beat those big teams before anyone's going to start being convinced that they're where they need to be. But it was absolutely a step in the right direction.
And they've got, no disrespect to them, but they've got Huddersfield Giants this week. Hopefully, a chance to build a bit more momentum.
Then they play Hull KR, but let's not forget that's the week before the grand final, the Challenge Cup final. What sort of team will Rovers put out? They could actually go on a bit of a.
They could go on a bit of
a run.
Again, real quickly, we talked about Leeds. Leeds found a way to win.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of controversy, maybe.
There was no controversy.
Strong word,
John Cartwright's done a very good job, but he didn't have a leg to stand on with the captain's challenge. I'm afraid.
And just Ryan Hall doing Ryan Hall.
Great finish
to win the
game.
I'm
telling you, I keep saying it. I like Leeds. I know they only scraped to a win,
but finding a way to win.
They found a way, and they showed some steel and guts and grit that just hasn't been there.
And at the same time, 4 defeats on the bounce for FC, but there was enough in that FC display to have some encouragement as well.
That was a step in the right direction after a horror show at the week.
Last thing that I want to touch on over the last few minutes, this came out this afternoon as we were recording this. Jared Waerea-Hargreaves, 2-game ban for that shot on Matty English that saw him pick up a yellow card in the game. It took us by surprise a bit in the office. Grade D charge. He doesn't play again till Wembley, and he's going to be fired up at Wembley. That's for certain. What do you make of that? It seems strong. I know we've just recorded as it come out, so we haven't been privy to all the evidence yet. But on first glance, it seemed quite hard.
I wish we could have recorded an hour later because I've asked for the minutes from the RFL. I wasn't surprised he was charged. I was surprised it was grade D. I wasn't surprised he got the extra points because Matt English didn't return. So he was always going to get the extra 3 points. I was just surprised it was a D. I didn't think it was that bad. What I will say, I watched it live and I thought sin bin. I thought it was pretty clear. It was a sin bin. I watched it back and it was worse than I thought it was, but still not a D. I still wouldn't say it was D. I thought it was a bad one because normally I think head contact yellow. I think he shoots out of the line. He doesn't make an attempt to dip. It's bad technique.
And we might have expected this from him in round 1 or round 2 or even round 3. This is the first time this season where he's kind of. I mean, he hasn't gone out to hurt him. He
got it wrong. He knew he got it wrong. He put his hand up straight away. He knew he got it wrong. But yeah, I'm surprised it's a D. I'm looking forward to getting the minutes to understand. I have checked that he hasn't got a D because the player got injured, which was suggested to me by someone as the charge came out. That's not the case. You get the extra points because they're injured. So they have seen something to warrant a D. It'll be interesting to know exactly what it was.
If I'm just flipping it, and if I'm a Hull Kingston Rovers fan and I'm trying to find some sort of positives, I think the chance that he gets a couple of weeks rest before a cup final.
He would have definitely.
He would have
definitely been rested for one of the games.
Yeah.
He would have definitely been rested either this week or next week. So he's realistically missing one game.
Yes. Yeah. Right. A busy show, lots to go at. Hopefully we've covered most of them for you this week. So we will be back later in the week with our predictions podcast. So look out for that. And until then, that's all from me. So thanks for being with us.
And above all else, enjoy your rugby league. Take care.
Bye, everyone.